Today, let's talk about trail etiquette. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about when you are out crawling or trailing, how do you act? Do you act a fool or do you act cool? Oh, that's so terrible.
Cool to act a fool?
It's not cool to act a fool. No. So maybe you have some things you can add to this discussion, but in my time of crawling, I've seen a lot of stuff on the trails. And the etiquette itself of being on the trails is multifold, and it's something that I feel like we should probably talk about relatively regularly. There's newbies that are getting into it. Maybe they don't realize some of these things, or maybe you've been into it for decades and you still do some of these things because, you know, you're going out for fun, and your type of fun may be different than other people's types of fun. So the first thing I would like to talk about is group respect. This can be a very wide topic itself, but there's a few things to consider, at least in my opinion. Number one is the dynamic of the group. Is it a bunch of guys that like to give each other a hard time, a lot of trash talking, that sort of thing, or is it more a respectful group to where you really don't get into that kind of low-key sort of guys? I say guys, there's gals out there too, but let's be honest, this is mostly a guy sport, and so I'm just going to use the term guys generically here. So being meshed with your group, and part of it is definitely a lot of acting like everybody else in a lot of ways. So if you've got a group of guys that, let's say, played basketball together or whatever, they're going to be trash talking a lot. That's kind of how they do. But if you're somebody that is coming from, let's say, a group of guys where you all work a desk job, maybe y'all do a little bit, but maybe not quite so much as if you're a bunch of basketball players that are used to kind of like butting heads on the court together. The dynamic between groups is always going to be different. But there's one thing that kind of splits people, and you let me know where you fall on this. This is music on the trail. Whether it's coming from your phone or Bluetooth speaker that you've got on your actual trail rig, do you like to hear music or do you not like to hear music? Myself personally, it doesn't bother me as long as it's not too loud. I want to be able to have a normal conversation with people. And I personally don't like to have music on my rigs. I don't usually listen to music all day either. Sometimes if I have a task that I really need to focus on, I'll break out my headphones. I've got some noise canceling ones, but you're really ignoring everybody around you when you get to that point. So it's a very divisive thing to whether or not you want to hear music on the trail. And of course, everybody's got different taste in music. So if you don't like rap and somebody's got some rap going with a 20 millimeter speaker, there's actually some really cool and very good sounding stereo systems that you can put into scale crawlers these days. That's a topic for another day, and maybe I should look into that. But at any rate, some people like the music and some people don't. Myself, I'm not really a big fan of it because I want to go out and I want to hear the birds. I want to hear the noise of my tires on the rocks, and I want to talk to people without having something blasting in my ear. But if somebody really wants to listen to the music, am I going to say anything? Yeah, probably not. I'm probably not going to say anything unless it's really, really loud. And in that case, I'm like, hey, can you turn it down a little bit for me? Because I'm right here at it and I can't even hear myself think. But again, divisive. Let me know where you stand on that. The second thing is sharing the trail. And I don't just mean with other crawlers. I mean with everybody that may be on the trail, because a lot of times when we go out crawling, it's going to be in a public park or some place where there are a lot of other people using it. Now, are you going to be on a trail with a bunch of mountain bikers? Nah, probably not. Maybe so. Let me know. Horses? Probably not. Maybe so. And if there are horses on the trail, more than likely, you don't want this thing running around their feet. You're going to have to be really careful about spooking a horse. You want it to be off to the side. And same thing for mountain bikers. I mean, they get spooked pretty easily too, and you don't want to see them get hurt, right? But otherwise, if there's people walking on a trail, in my opinion, if there are people that aren't crawlers enjoying the same scenes that you want to be extra careful about your noise. And this does include music, but also the noise that your crawler is making. And this leads into another point that I'll get to later, but that is the noise that your electronics themselves make. So you always want to be respectful. You don't want to have a bunch of trash laying out or anything like that, which is a whole other point. But making sure that you get invited back, essentially, is what we always want to make sure that we do. We want to be good stewards of the trails that we're on and the rocks that we're on, and we also want to make sure that we're not causing undue stress to other people around, because they're also there to enjoy the scenery. The next thing I'd like to talk about is safety itself. And This isn't so much trail etiquette, but this is just thinking ahead and planning ahead, because honestly, when you're on a trail, or especially the rocks, it can be quite dangerous. So what do we want to do? Number one, you need to wear proper shoes. This is a really big one that I see a lot of people going out in sandals on. And okay, if you rock climb in sandals, or if you constantly are going up and down monolithic rocks in your sandals, yeah, sure, fine. But if you're not very sure-footed, or if you got somebody new coming out, you want to make sure that they know what they're getting themselves into. And if you're going into something like riprap, depending on the time of year, you could definitely have snakes or other things in those rocks. Also, depending on where you are, your part of the world, you may have snakes, you may not. But in Missouri, riprap especially, we get a lot of snakes. And that's something that I've come up on quite a few times on the trail and in the rocks. So you got to dress appropriately for this. And that means essentially wearing boots, not even sneakers. And I'm not great about always wearing boots when I go out crawling. A lot of times I'll wear my sneakers because I wear them all the time. But it is something to be cautious about. The other thing to worry about is literally the trail itself. And when you're on rocks, your footing is sometimes precarious. And on the monolithic rock that we have out here at Capon, there is between a 15 and 80 foot drop off the side of one of the cliffs. And I have seen people almost fall off of this, especially when their rig starts to tumble off. You know, you want to grab it. But when it boils down to it, the safety of your rig is nowhere near as the safety of a human. Rigs can be fixed. Humans can't always be fixed. And it is a lot more expensive to fix a human than it is for just your normal crawler. So something to be very careful of, and be very careful around your group. Just kind of look forwards into the future and think, is this going to put me or somebody else into a precarious situation? If you've got kids around especially. This is highly important, and I always tell my kids, if a rig is falling down the hill, don't try to catch it. Just try to stay out of its way and let it do its thing. Because you get a finger in a rig, you know, this rig tumbling around, you go to try to grab it and your finger gets caught in here when you go to grab it, it can break your finger. I have seen some very close calls, and I have had some very close calls myself trying to get wrapped up and catch a rig, and bad news. So safety, multiple fold to this particular thing, but it's something that we really have to be aware of. And I think that it's probably the first thing I should have talked about here was safety on the rocks, but it's in the middle of this. So let me know your thoughts on that. Maybe you've got some more stuff to add as far as safety. The next thing, we're going back to noise. So when I was speaking of noise, we already talked about music, and that can be one sort of noise, but the other sort of noise is the actual noise that these rigs make. And it's not so much of a problem these days because, well, the switching frequency of our ESCs has evolved. And I can't speak so much for the Etiquette and the Castle systems these days, but used to be they were very loud, and I know that Castle is still very loud. I'm not sure about Etiquette. But using a system with a Castle-based ESC, especially with an outrunner, was very loud. It still is very loud, and that can cause problems on the trail because it's not only audible, but it's audible at a frequency that travels very far. And it's a very, very audible frequency, like 13 kilohertz. It's dead in what almost everybody can still hear, and it's annoying, honestly, and it can be very, very loud. But with the advent of AM32, Escape 32, and the Hobbywing FOC systems, the noise has been effectively reduced or eliminated completely. And the only thing that we have left is our gear mesh noise, which this guy, it's not even booted up, but as you can tell, the gear noise itself is kind of loud. So outside on the rocks, that itself is not nearly as bad as an outrunner with a Castle system would be, but it is still something to be aware of. You don't want to make a bunch of noise pollution to where maybe somebody's going to go to the city council and complain about it, or maybe this is a private area and you're not going to be asked back. So just be cautious of that. And if you are using a system with, let's say, a Castle ESC and an outrunner, think about it. Just think about it, and maybe upgrade to something that's a little more modern, like an AM32 to knock that noise out. It's not with all systems, but something to be aware of. The next thing, trash and your footprint on the trail. So it really should go without saying that we don't want to leave trash on the trail. And as far as a group in the whole, I find that crawlers are very respectful in this regard. Now, we get to a big event, I've seen a lot of cigarette butts thrown down. I have seen, trail trash, your rig breaks and you don't pick up all the pieces. Of course, there's always going to be detritus that falls off the rigs by accident, but generally we want to make sure that we leave the trail cleaner than when we started, and we don't really want to beat in that trail too hard. Now, there is going to be an impact. These tires, they dig into the dirt in soft rock, like sandstone-based rock or moon rock that you would find out in Utah or Nevada, a bunch of that side of the country. These tires will actually eat into that rock over time. So you just want to be cautious if you're in something like a state park where there's not a lot of crawling activity or there is no crawling activity allowed. You don't want this guy to be making a bunch of ruts and leaving a bunch of rubber on the trail. You want a lower impact. If this is a park where they allow full-size rock crawlers in particular, then this little guy is not really going to make an impact. So you need to be cautious and cognizant of where you are. It really does. If we want to have access to these spots long term, we have to make sure that we are not a problem. And of course, going back to the trash aspect, bring a little trash bag with you. If you do find some trash on the trail from somebody else, it never hurts to pick that up. So I would advise that you try to make the place cleaner than where you found it, when you found it, and where you left it. Just low impact as possible. And that is really the last thing. We want to be low impact. And this can really be everything. Low impact on the trail itself. We don't want to have a bunch of trash around there. We don't want to dig the trail out. We don't want to have a high impact on the noise of the environment. And generally, we want to be good stewards of our land. And that is really, I think, the biggest thing. And this is more than just crawling. We want to be good stewards of our own land in life. Something that is kind of close to my heart because I do love to garden. And a lot of the practices that we have is not necessarily low impact. Of course, the petrol revolution has changed everything. And let's not kid ourselves. These are electric, but these are made through the power of sweet, sweet petroleum technology. It wasn't the Industrial Revolution that caused all of this. It was cheap liquid energy that really got us to the next level of industrialization. So just be aware that when we do all of these super fun things, that it does use resources more than not doing it would be. But of course, as monkeys with opposable thumbs, we kind of like to have some fun and have hobbies because, let's face it, at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of us like to just sit down and watch TV and be completely unproductive. We like to do things. We like to build things. We like to make things, and we like to go places. So as long as we're being low impact when we're going places, then I think everything is a-okay. If you do have something to add, leave your comments down below, and I would love to see them. As always, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.